Hey, what's up, viewer? Thank you for continuing along with this Pong tutorial series. In the last video I mentioned I'm going to create a Pong design document as a sort of roadmap for all of the parts we have to create in the Unity engine to recreate the classic game Pong. So I wound up going through and creating a few sections, and I filled out these sections in about 2 pages. These sections include game objects, UI objects, player inputs, certain data values, and certain behaviors we have to define within the game space. I'll start by going over the game objects. There aren't too many of them. We have the 2 paddles for the player and for the opponent. We have the roof and the floor as terrain. We have the 2 invisible goals that still have to be set up using trigger colliders. And we also have the ball. Next are UI objects. We have scores for both the player and the opponent. We have a start menu and a pause menu, both of which have the ability to return the player to the start. The start menu starts the game, whereas the pause menu takes us back to the start menu. Both menus have the option to exit the game. In the event the player can score 3 points, there is a special victory window that congratulates the player, and then gives them the option to go back to the start menu or exit the game. Conversely, if the player is scored upon 3 times, there is a defeat window, which gives the player the option to return to the start menu or exit the game. For player inputs, it's very simple. The player has the ability to use the up arrow to move their paddle up. They have the ability to use the down arrow to move their arrow down. Move their paddle down. And they can use the escape key to toggle the pause menu. For a few of the data elements, we have the player's active score, the opponent's active score. We have a value to determine how many points are necessary for victory. We have a boolean to determine the pause state of the game. We have a floating point value to determine how fast the paddle moves up or down. We have the position for where the ball spawns. For every time the game is restarted or a player scores, the ball has to get reset. And that actually reminds me, we actually also have a ball speed option as well to determine how fast the ball actually moves. We have a player paddle spawn position and opposing paddle spawn position because those objects are also not static. So every time the ball is scored, the idea would be to put them back at the starting position. Possibly not necessary, but it's an option. The last section we have are a few of the behaviors for the game. A simple behavior would be that the player starts the game. In this instance, we have to shift the scene to the game scene, and we have to give the ball its initial velocity. Which actually gives us another value up here, which is not only the ball's spawn position, but the ball starting trajectory. If we give it a speed with no trajectory, that means it won't move. If we give it a trajectory with no speed, that means it won't move. So we have to, at the beginning, have a default trajectory and a default speed in order to start the ball moving. And once the player starts the game and shifts into the game scene, the ball will have to be given this initial velocity, and it'll have to be given its initial trajectory as well. The player also has the ability to... So behavior happens when the player toggles the pause. This will actually swap the pause state. It'll be able to tell which state it's in, and then it'll go through the proper behaviors. If the player selects to return to the start screen, the current running scene, which is the game scene, has to swap to the start scene. If the player exits the game, there is a Unity command that will actually exit play mode or exit the build. In the event the player moves the paddle up, we have to add an upward force to the player's paddle. And in the event the player moves the paddle down, we have to add a downward force to the player's paddle. If the ball hits any type of collidable, it will reflect against that collider, and it will continue along its new path. The ball hitting the goal counts as a trigger, not a collidable. So when the ball hits the goal, the point has to be scored for whomever scored the point. The computer needs to check if that point pushed the person who scored over the victory count. And if the victory is attained, they have to go through these paths here. And the ball position also has to get reset anytime a goal is scored. In the event victory is attained, the victory screen is activated. If a defeat is attained, then the defeat screen must be activated. And in both cases, it may be necessary to pause the game during this, so like the ball isn't flying around or the paddles aren't moving. Might not be necessary, but potentially we might have to pause the game during these screens. And finally, in order to create behavior for the opposing paddle without requiring the player to put inputs in, there are going to be a few behaviors on the opposing paddle. The idea is for it to just adjust to the ball's trajectory, not just go up and down randomly. We could make it go up and down randomly, but I wanted to make it a little more intelligent than that. So depending on the trajectory of the ball, the paddle decides to move up or down, and we have to treat that as a player input essentially and add that type of force to get the paddle moving in the correct direction. Alright, so that was everything I can think of and a few things that I remembered for what we need to actually create the entire game of Pong from start to finish. It's not too complicated of a game, yet we still managed to get to about 2 pages here for all of the parts it requires. It will be a little more nuanced to actually make all of this come to life, but now that we have a pretty good idea, and now that you have a pretty good idea of what this game is going to take, we can now move into the next set of videos where I'm actually going to start creating all of this using Unity 3D and using the Unity 3D technology packages that can actually do a whole heck of a lot for making all of this pretty simple to create. So like always, if you are interested in my content and what I have to provide, do not be afraid to like, share, and subscribe to these videos. Also, do not be afraid to go take a look at the Patreon and support me through that. In the next video, I am going to dive into the Unity engine and actually create all of these physical game objects to start making this recreation of Pong. Thank you very much, and thank you for watching this video.